Luigi, did you do it? That's completely out of touch and an insult to the intelligence of the American people and their lived experience.
Hey, yo, what's up, fellas? I got Saint on today to talk about Luigi Mangione, the heartthrob, the man who's been on all the headlines. The hype has died down a little bit, but yeah, Saint, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Saintstereo, Marcus Leninist. On TikTok, you can find me at Saintstereo.
It's been a while since we talked. You were on my first episode, and then I've been on your live streams like off and on, but I kind of missed you on this podcast, buddy. So good to have you back. You
Glad to be back.
Yeah,
Yeah.
of course. So let's talk about what we know. On December 4th, Brian Thompson was in New York for an annual United Healthcare investors meeting. He left the Marriott Hotel where he was staying. As he walked down the Midtown Street on 54th Street, he was shot from behind by an unknown suspect with a silencer at 6:45 local time. And then 5 days later, on December 9th, local police arrested Luigi Mangione in a McDonald's, and on him they found a 3D printed suppressor, multiple fake IDs, and the gun, a silencer gun. So, first of all, in addition to a manifesto, but the manifesto was weird. It had like "I love the police" written on it, like somewhere. So, I'm just gonna throw it out there to you, saying, like, do you think that he's not actually the perpetrator?
Well, I'm inclined to believe his claim of innocence, as that's what he says he is. The police historically will fabricate any sort of tales they can spin to get a person, cornered into to seal a case shut. Excuse me. You know what I'm saying, to solve a case, because there was a very high profile execution style, sort of like it was a little too good to just seem to be like some random kid that would like leave all the stuff on him for 5 days later and get caught with it. I don't know. So yes, I'm inclined to believe his innocence.
One thing that doesn't make sense to me is that apparently Luigi suffers from immense back pain because he broke his back during a surfing accident. How he exactly biked away and even did the assassination when he had so much pain, I don't know though. I've never lived with this disability, so I don't know how able you are to do it, or if that adrenaline rush happened. Um, but yeah, I will say the case is very strange. Luigi maintains his innocence. It's so strange that he was found with all the evidence on him unless he wanted to be caught and he had some kind of main character syndrome. And in addition to that, even oh no, go ahead, Saint.
I'm sorry, but those things don't match up really. Like the main character syndrome too. Like I thought about that as well, but like he had the backpack he had was full of Monopoly money. It's like meant to throw people off him. He had a fake phone to do the same thing. The person that did the shooting, and then he somehow manages to completely escape, but then keeps all the stuff on him and only goes to Altoona, Pennsylvania, where he has no reason to be whatsoever. It's just and well, plus like the crime scene, they found a candy wrapper with his fingerprints on it. That's just I don't see the NYP being that confident.
Absolutely, absolutely. I don't know why they were so quick too to just jump onto this without really double checking. Especially since they've been hammering charges on him. He's gotten a terrorist charge, which in an era where people like Daniel Penny can get free for murdering a homeless man who was simply just having like a psychotic episode, it's insane to just put a terrorist charge on Luigi. Why do you think that they put a terrorist charge on Luigi, saying?
Because they're drawing their lines in the sand, really. They're saying they're not gonna mess around or take any sort of upheaval in public eye. It was a PR move to help silence and, you know, sort of dissuade people from engaging in sort of any of these acts, to not lionize it.
Absolutely. I think this has really been the year where we've seen sort of the double standard of Western society fall apart. And of course, it's always been there. You always it was only certain people who paid attention who ever found it, right? Well, for example, back when America was in this Jim Crow South, the double standard was very obvious and glaring, right? Black people always got way worse sentences and were lynched extrajudicially. And in fact, the jury nullification that we're all talking about that we're hoping can be used to free Luigi was historically used to not convict white people who were guilty of murdering black people. So
I lost you pretty good.
what? Oh, yeah, no, I'm back. Am I back?
Yeah, yep, you're back.
Okay, okay. So it's really crazy how everything went down. Honestly, let's move on to Luigi himself, or not Luigi himself, but the action himself. Do you think that this was a positive action overall? Like, what effect did it have on America? What effect did it have on the left? Will it have anything lasting? Go ahead, Saint.
I think that almost every single other time, I would say an individual act of terror or a single isolated incident with a lone wolf factor is never a good idea. I think for the unique times that we live in, it did sort of work as like a crystallization of the frustration of the proletariat, where it did in fact push people into class consciousness. It made people more aware. I saw right wing and left wing and classic liberals and even, neoconservatives that were embracing this motion. So for this very specific incident, it worked out in our favor. But it's just otherwise it would normally lead to just well, it probably still will lead to some more draconian methods being employed onto the proletariat or and we'll just have to see as that unfolds. But I think the lasting effect at the very least is it did manage to wake some people up to the disgruntlement of the working class.
Yes. Yeah, no, 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 exactly. I mean, I think the thing about adventurism, and Lennon wrote about this, is that it so often isolates you from the very people you're trying to help out, right? It very often isolates you from the working class itself. Whenever you do this deed by the gun, which was very popular in Russia at the time. In fact, Lenin lost his older brother to the deed by the gun against a plot against the czar. Um, it often leads to, whereas these plotters always thought that by assassinating these political figures, it would lead to this revolutionary fervor. It often led to the proletariat being very confused, right? Being very confused, and often ended up hurting the movement. And so that's why Lenin warned us against adventurism, right? Always group mass action that's systemic is better than an individual with a gun. But this is sort of a really rare case where the deed by the gun has awakened something within the American people that's sort of been resting there. This long-standing anger, not only at healthcare, which is one of the most bullshit systems in America and in any developed nation, but also just the system of capitalism itself, late-stage neoliberalism itself. Do you have anything to add, Saint?
I would say that the main thing to remember about individual acts of terror being ineffective is that it's never a singular person's fault. Like the one CEO didn't make the healthcare system. This obviously is still going to go on without him. So it's that, and it also makes the working class be like in this waiting position, waiting for someone to come and save them all the time, and stops a lot of ground movement that way as well.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I think that's the thing, really. He murdered Brian Thompson, and nothing fundamentally changed in terms of that, right? Like base wise, nothing changed, right? Economically wise, nothing changed. Brian Thompson got replaced almost immediately by a ghoul who is just as vicious and predatory as Brian Thompson was. And that's because Brian Thompson didn't create capitalism. Brian Thompson didn't create for profit healthcare. The system of finance monopoly capitalism, as we know it today, created this system, right? So Brian Thompson was really just a filler point. And so he'd been replaced very quickly by a ghoul. United Healthcare, for 3 days, I believe, after the shooting, doctors were saying was approving claims, but has gone back since then to denying as many claims as possible, which was the whole reason that Luigi was motivated to do this. So certainly structurally, in the base of society, right, the economic base of society, nothing has changed. Brian Thompson was just a filler point. But culturally, in the superstructure, culturally, something has shifted within the masses, I feel as though, where a lot of deep-seated anger has come out. Well, what do you make of this, Saint? Like, could this anger be used for something productive, or is it going towards fascism? Because the masses hating the rich is not always, as much as we want it to be, a recipe for communist socialist revolution.
Right. Right. It's not necessarily. It can easily go into fascism. I mean, the NSDAP started as anti-capitalist when they in their prime or in their foundation at the very least. So yeah, it's something that, however, it can be utilized before it gets to that tipping point. I believe to if we're doing the work as people who spread the message and do propaganda, then it should be something that we can utilize. It's all about, like, the boots on the ground organization to be able to reach people that are just having burgeoning class consciousness or becoming more aware of the inequalities in the system. And it's gonna get more starkly contrast, I think. I think we're gonna, of course, lose people to the other side, and we're just gonna have to do what we can to combat that as it emerges.
Yes, yes, yeah, certainly, certainly. I think this really has there's just been this growing resentment within the American working class about how the system of late stage monopoly finance capitalism has manifested itself, especially in this neoliberal austerity era. You know, capitalism in America, for a certain section of workers, mostly white, used to be very nice. You know, you could, after you got your GED in high school, you could get yourself a very nice paying steel mill job and afford a house with and of a family, two room house, a family, a dog, a white picket fence. You could live the American dream off of a job that didn't require a lot of education. But nowadays, because of austerity, because of where capitalism has headed, it almost seems like imperialism has come home in some way, right? You know, the drastic effects of capitalism that the American population, well, certainly the white population, you know, black people, minorities never really got protected from this. But that section of the American population that was being protected from the worst aspects of capitalism through imperialism is suddenly having to face that capitalism at home in a little bit. What do you make of this saying this rising tide? Why? Where do you think it's come from? Just anger at the healthcare system, anger at capitalism?
Yeah, it's a mixture of everything. I mean, we've seen it happening for a few years now is that people are waking up because their lives are getting considerably more difficult. Their material conditions are getting worse in late stage capitalism, like you said. Like we pay like 8 times as much for stuff as they did, I think, 30 years ago. If I don't have the numbers or anything, but off the top of my head. Anyways, people are starting to feel that pressure and they're starting to look for an outlet to, I mean, that's what gave rise to the populist movements, like MAGA, etc. That is a disgruntlement at the system. They want to change the drain swap and whatnot. And that's where it's coming to a head to where people are starting to realize that politicians aren't ever going to do anything for us and we need to start doing something for ourselves. And it manifests in stuff like a CEO or a sub full of billionaires. It's these moments that show people the real frustration within the working class because of the rising inequality. And what can be done about that is where I think we come in as people who've done the reading. So
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, every great Marxist since Lenin's time, probably even before that, has always admitted that there's a section of the working class that is more advanced, like more class conscious, and there's a section of the working class that's more a little bit behind, a little bit caught up in a capitalist mythology, capitalist superstructure and hegemony. But recently, really, it seems like even mainstream America is starting to get class consciousness because neoliberalism doesn't work anymore. Every single year, living standards are getting worse and worse. Homeless people are growing. Housing prices are becoming unaffordable. This really is a lost generation of Americans who are tired, burnt out, angry, and they don't really have the right politics. They don't really have the right scientific framework. For that, you need to read Marx, you need to read Lenin, you need to read Mao, you need to read Stalin, what have you. But they do have those feelings that the system is broken. The fact that this is the support for Luigi is cross party, right? Both the American mainstream left, whatever you want to call it, the comrade of the left we have, and the right have supported what Luigi did. It really shows how discontent everybody is, including especially Trump's main voter base. It's made up of people who are tired of the status quo. I would even say that the 2024 election that we just recently had was really the question of, do you want to maintain the status quo as it is, the neoliberal status quo, or do you want quote unquote revolution, right? And it's a fake revolution. Trump offers a fake revolution. He offers a fascist revolution, which is never really a real revolution, right? It's the aesthetics of revolution while capitalism stays in place. Maybe a dog bone is thrown to one section of the working class where another section gets eaten up. But it was a question of, do you want to maintain the status quo? And the American people overwhelmingly said, I am tired of the neoliberal status quo that has been ruling our country so far. Do you have anything to add, Saint?
Losing you, been pre.
Oh, okay. I
Oh,
was gonna,
there you go.
yeah, I was gonna say, we we have rejected the last election was a rejection of the neoliberal status quo as it has been presented so far. Do you have anything to add?
Yeah. You're right. I mean, I totally agree with that analysis. Is spot on, in my opinion. I think that the reason people seem to vote towards Donald Trump and MAGA as like a way to sort of reconcile some of these antagonisms they're feeling in their life is because that's the only option they see presented. And yeah, like you said, I think it was more about like a vote for do you want to keep this going, liberal style status quo? And people overwhelmingly were like, no, no, we do not. So it's a good sign. It's just still work to do.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Let's move on to the media response. The media response to this has been sort of insane, and the legal response to this has been sort of insane. First of all, the legal response is crazy. Daniel Penny, a man who murdered a homeless black man in cold blood, who was simply just having a psychotic breakdown. Perhaps he was on drugs, perhaps he was not. What does it matter? Was let free. He gets to shake hands with Donald Trump. But the murder of a CEO gets a nationwide manhunt with billions and billions of dollars. The hypocrisy of the American system are here manifest, right? That CEOs matter more than the average Joe. That there is a hierarchy of human beings within America as it's set up. Saint, do you have anything to add to that?
Um, no, I think that what they're doing is very predictable, and it's showing people that yeah, like you said, some people matter just a bit more than some others in our current world.
Absolutely. I wouldn't even say matter a bit more. I would say matter, period. Like,
True.
the average Joe does not matter at all. If Brian Thompson had been near you walking down New York City, and been shot, nothing would have happened.
Nothing. Yeah.
No, no, the murderer would still be out there. There would be no nationwide manhunt. And even if he had been like somebody like a hardworking father of two, that was just a average worker and not a CEO, right? That's the thing that a lot of people are latching on to, that Brian Thompson was a hardworking father of two with a wife. If he had not been a CEO, the killer would still be out there. Nobody would care. It's really a hierarchy of human beings, and only really the rich matter within the United States. And the hypocrisy is so manifest, so evilly out there. This really has been the year, 2024, in which American hypocrisy of the neoliberal era has been revealed in a way that you can't ignore, right? With the Ukraine war, the Ukrainians, the poor Ukrainians, we have to care about the Ukrainians, but the Palestinians can go die. Um, Daniel Penny can kill a homeless man, but Luigi for killing Brian Thompson is a terrorist. I mean, and recently even, uh, there's this fear within the bourgeois. They are so afraid. The NYPD has released a report saying anybody who showed even slight support for Luigi is labeled a terrorist. Say,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Yeah. It is. Again, it's something that's to be expected. They see that the working class is getting mad, and they're trying to do everything they can to dissuade that. And the media responses are in a way making it worse for them. They're making it more obvious that they are afraid of us, and they're afraid of us with good reason because we way outnumber them by a lot. So I feel like the responses will get more draconian, more erratic, and we will see more people wake up because of it. I mean, this really like, I hate to be overly optimistic, but it does feel like the beginning of a new time, for us as people here in the United States.
I will say that there has been this rising tide of class consciousness within the American people. And every once in a while, it sort of cracks through, right? And this has been one of the times through the murder of Brian Thompson that sort of leaks through, and we've been able to see it out in the open. And then the hegemony is so good at sort of getting people to be complacent again. The news media as response to this, in which they've disgustingly over and over again tried to even like insinuate that Brian Thompson was a great man. How dare you even celebrate this? Healthcare shouldn't even be discussed during this time. And the violence of the healthcare system, which denies millions of people healthcare all across America and leads 40,000 people to die of deprivation in America. Is that right, Saint?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, like
That's correct.
40,000. Yeah. Which is insane. That's the official number of people who've died in Gaza. Of course, the number's likely much higher. It's like 100,000, 200,000 by now. But that's the about the official amount of people that have died officially in a war zone, an active war zone, every single year in America. I mean, really, you can see the plan that the capitalists have for us under late stage neoliberal capitalism. We saw it in COVID. We've seen it in the Gaza war. It's that as climate change, as capitalism hits the fan, they're going to leave us all to die, and they're going to close the door behind us. They're going to sacrifice us so that their line goes up. They're going to squeeze as much profit out of us before they can, and then they're going to close the door behind us. Really, that seems like what the richest plan has been, and it's been very clear and very open. I mean, I think a lot of people's eyes were open during COVID, and a lot of people's eyes are being open right now. The media is being shown, and whereas before, like, you could sort of ignore it, and the media talks about, like, I don't know, like, Kim K's new photo shoot cover, and you can sort of ignore that's a tool of the bourgeois. The media now is being shown as the tool of the bourgeois that it is. Um, as a sort of mass mind control to get workers complacent within the hegemony and to believe that the billionaires' best interests are their best interests. Saint?
Well, yeah, and it's partly, or I say largely, due to social media. People communicate instantly and have all this information that negates the spin that they try to put on CNN 2 hours later. It doesn't really have as much of an effect, and people are just way more aware to that. They're way more hip to that now. So it's something that they're not going to be. I feel like they're just going to be hitting their head against the wall the entirety of the time.
Mm.
And yes, I do believe that they are trying to, in a way, close the door off behind us or just leave us to die, make us. I think a lot of them think that their system's going to collapse and that they're going to have to figure out a way to just control their security forces while they ride out the end, I guess. And that's more scary than thinking that they're not just trying to figure out a way to negate the end from coming. They're just building bunkers and spaceships. So,
Absolutely. Absolutely. They have no long-term plan for us, right? It's just death and destruction for us pretty much. And they get to escape either in their like SpaceX rocket ship or they hide away in a bunker. It doesn't even seem like they have a long-term plan for themselves. I mean, that is how destructive capitalism is. Marx recognized that because of the competition of the market, capitalism leads to this infinite growth in a finite world. And we're pretty much in a crisis of overproduction, which I don't even think Marx could have predicted that we get to the point where we're in a crisis of overproduction instead of underproduction, where we're literally eating the planet itself and eating everything on it, right? It's insane, just absolutely insane what they have in store for humanity. I think the president of Colombia, I believe his name is. I'm gonna search up his name super quick. Saint, cover for me. Say something while I search up his name.
yeah, about, I think Marx did predict overproduction, though, by the way. But beyond that, it is something that we need to address, and we have a very, very limited time in which we can address any of these issues, especially with uh, AI being rapidly developed. That's going to become more and more problematic as it's owned by the ruling class. It's going to definitely be used in our exploitation and oppression. And that's something we don't have a heck of a lot of time on. I'm thinking like 2 to 3 years before it's very effective at doing what it needs to do with these automated robots and like, they're using it all for military tech. It's not for people. It's not meant for to do what it's supposed to do. Like OpenAI is for profit now. It's something that's going to continue to get worse, and hopefully people will see that and decide to do something about it. Because otherwise, we're looking at a very either way we're looking at a difficult time. But one of those ways leads to extinction. And
Absolutely.
I think we should negate that.
What I meant was that Marx couldn't have predicted overproduction to the scale that we have now, where it's destructive to the planet. But even then, I believe he did. I was wrong. But the president of Colombia, Gustavo Petro Urrego, he said that Gaza was a sort of beacon, a sort of warning for what they have in store for us for the future, right? For the future of humanity. And I think that really is it. The bourgeois do not have a good plan for us left. It really is just death, destruction, and our profits go up. It's so capitalism is such a disgustingly evil and self-eating system that it just leads to this where even they don't have a plan for themselves for what they're gonna do. They're building bunkers, they're building spaceships with through SpaceX, but even then, what do you do when you're the climate change and hits the fan, right? Like, what do you do when you're no longer able to sustain resources and supply chains like you were before, right? There's no plan that they have. Saying
I think their I think their plan is to take as many workers as they can and start over like a Noah's Ark kind of thing is what it seems like just by looking at some of their bunker designs or like how Elon Musk wants to colonize Mars, which I don't think he's capable of doing at all. So I think whoever tries to do that is just gonna die real quick. But I I think they are trying to look at it as in like a return to feudalism or in just basically enslaving some people to do their work for them and continue on with their nonsense.
absolutely. Absolutely. You can sort of see that in that. And I was going to call you crazy for saying that, but I'm sorry to say, but you're right actually. Because it just clicked on me that all these billionaires are funding these utopian projects. Here in California, they just bought a couple hundred acres of land to build a utopian city, which they completely control, Silicon Valley tech bros. So y- it is sort of and a lot of Marxists have criticized that term, techno feudalism, right? But capitalism has really sort of let go of so many of its progressive elements and regressed so much in this stage that it sort of has returned to a lot of the old regressive reactionary aspects of feudalism and the relations to the means of production, relations of production that we had before. I think that as Lenin and Marx, and all the great Marxists pointed out, eventually the relations of production get in the way of the means of production, right? The productive forces, where the economic system, right? Billionaires, right? Bourgeois and proletariat, all these 1% own all the means of production. That actually gets in the way of the advancement of society, right? They become this parasitic class that actually starts I hate to say the word, but like hindering, retarding the growth of humanity, right? And I'm sorry to use that term, but I couldn't think of a better one. But they start retarding the growth of humanity itself because of the relations of production. Because we have to have these billionaires owning the means of production and everything, we're not able to advance to a higher stage where we're able to use all these scientific achievements like open AI, like all these great things that we're able to produce more than enough to give all of humanity a good living standard for our own good. Instead, we have to use them for the good of the bourgeoisie. Saint, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, it's just by design. It's something that you'll never. So if like you own the industry, you're not gonna innovate yourself out of progress. It's just so it does. It's always hampered humanity. It's always slowed us down, and it's always hindered our progress. It's something that we will have to overcome, and in a way, it will have some aspects that seem akin to feudalism, but of course, it's obviously not feudalism because it would be after here now, something like barbarism, etc. But it is something that we have to actively just work against, right? It's
Mhm.
just something that is in the future that if we don't solve soon, we're not going to be around much longer. Like this would probably be the last generation. To be honest, it looks like that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I wouldn't say that this is the last few generations, but I will say the next few generations um, are fucked, right? They have a very uh, dangerous dying planet ahead of them. And the sort of legacy media response to the Brian Thompson assassination in addition to the social media response, really shows the big generational gap that we have within America, where legacy media is obviously viewed by boomers and social media is obviously viewed by Gen Z. And Gen Z and the younger generations, Gen Alpha, what have you, millennials, even some Gen Xers that are on social media, have overwhelmingly supported the killing of Brian Thompson, or at least showed no sympathy towards Brian Thompson, showed sympathy towards Luigi. And legacy media and even the older generations can't figure that out. Do you think there's a way to sort of bridge this gap, Saint?
Without getting them on social media, no, not really. Like they get all their information from, well, here in Nebraska, the people around me that are in their later years in their, the boomer era, the golden era, etc., the ones that are still alive anyway, they get all their information from Fox News or the church pew. And that's it. They go to the same place and work. They go to eat at the same place. They do all the same things with the same type of people who have all the same opinions. It's literally an echo chamber of reactionary nonsense. So I feel like there's not really good, you'd have to expose them to it somehow. And I guess the best way would be to get them on social media, or they'll find out as their material conditions get to the point to where their social security checks stop coming in, or something like that. It would take that, I think, something to where their material conditions get sort of significantly worse than they are now.
That's the odd thing, though. I will say that a lot of boomers are fucked over by healthcare, the healthcare system. A lot of them do get denied claims. A lot of them are facing sort of the late stage effects of capitalism, where social security checks are nothing anymore. You know, social security check used to mean that you could at least get a roof over your head or at least a little bit of food on the table. But inflation has become so much that these little dog bones that even the boomer generation were given were are sort of going away. The biggest group that is facing homelessness is boomers right now. So I think certainly it must point towards some sort of envelopment within the hegemony, perhaps because boomers grew up in the Cold War era. They were yeah, last generation to face the USSR and communism being the great evil. Um,
But I will add on to that though, that that's what they use illegal immigrants for. That's what they use uh, LGBTQIA hate for. That's so they blame it on something else, not the actual issue. That's where that comes in. I think it's just that's why they're all very conservative, and most of them pro Trump. They all believe that someone else is destroying America's dream, not that America never had a good dream to begin with.
mm, absolutely. Absolutely. The way that this killing has galvanized the American people, I think, has surprised everybody, even communists, right? We all knew that the system of capitalism is fucked up. We all knew that there's so much violence going on. But the way in which the American people have sort of sided with Luigi has shocked everybody, those in power and those not in power, those who even who laughed when Brian Thompson was shot. Um, what I can say though is that this is not a proof that and these sort of anarchistic deeds by the gun work. If we examine Luigi objectively, right, you know, while he did galvanize the American people, these spontaneous actions always sort of fade away eventually, right? Without the vanguard party, without that mass action by the masses, the working class sort of is aimless, right? It has these moments of spontaneity where it has class consciousness, and then it fades away, fades away. It has these other moments of class consciousness, and then it fades away, fades away. Do you think that Luigi's assassination attempt will have any long-lasting effects, or is this going to be another fading away? Is this unique?
It, it's too soon to say, as in, hasn't even been a month yet. I do think that you can't undo your class conscious. At least I haven't seen that ever happen. And so the people that were pushed over into that, the people that were made aware of the glaring contradictions within the system, that will remain. But as far as will it have lasting impact towards the revolutionary movement in general, it's hard to say. Because things do seem to be accelerated. Things are speeding up, and these events are happening more frequently. And paired with all the other crazy things going on in the world, it could add to that and create a cumulative effect. And we could see something But as an individual act, it it doesn't hold as much weight as the entirety of the movement. It might do some good to wake people up. It might do some good to further the movement of the workers. It's just as an individual, singular, isolated incidents, it probably lived its rare and very enjoyable usefulness.
Absolutely. Absolutely. This is not a tactic that should be repeated. I don't think so. Because if it gets botched, right, the deed by the gun, every time it's botched, you end up isolating yourself from the very people that you're trying to help out. The proletariat ends up confused. Um,
Mhm.
that's what happened with the assassination attempts of the czars by the Narodniks. But even
Yeah.
then, I will say that gaining class consciousness, while that never goes away, when you gain it, you can get confused. You can direct that class consciousness in a confused way. And I think that confusion is Trump, that confusion is racism, that confusion is anti-LGBTQ stuff. That confusion, your class consciousness does not guarantee that you follow a scientific framework. Do you get what I'm saying, Saint? Did we cut out?
I think I lost you again.
Okay. I was saying class consciousness does not guarantee you a scientific framework. It can make you
Right.
confused. Do you get what I'm saying, Saint?
Truth. No, that's absolutely right. I mean, it's easy to become aware that you're suffering and want to change things and then try to change things in exactly the wrong way that actually reinforces things. So it's something that the people who are scientific about it, Marx-Leninists and, theory anarchists, etc., need to really do the work at helping guide people in the right direction.
Absolutely. Absolutely. What are some ways that you think we can do that? First of all, of course, pointing out that Brian Thompson was just one part of a big machine called capitalism. What do you think are some ways that we can sort of use this energy in productive ways?
Well, I would start talking to people. That's always like my go-to for building a revolutionary movement or potential is just go out and speak to people in your area, speak to people online, wherever you're at, where you interact with other workers, talk to them about the contradictions, highlight the incidences and how it's sort of causing people to be more aware of things and utilize that and push them on over to our side. It's trying work to say the least, but it's very rewarding when it happens. And there's really no other way to do it. We are not taught this stuff. We have to have someone teach us this stuff. So it's our obligation as people who know more to go out and tell people about it.
Absolutely, absolutely, and it's not a paternalistic thing, but it's more of a, brotherly thing,
Mhm.
it's not like,
Absolutely.
puppeting the masses for your own personal gain, as other people try to sort of, is painted. We have seen the rise of class consciousness with the American workers with the rise of unions. However, the trade union movement and Lenin warned against this. It sort of remains a little bit reactionary, and the trade union movement, of course, without guidance of the vanguard party, always ends up towards something reactionary. But it has been a positive effect in terms of Starbucks workers unionizing. It has been a positive effect in terms of these mass strikes that we've been seeing. But I think something that was a bit disheartening was the longshoreman high strike, which saw dock workers strike. They actually crossed the picket line to export weapons to Israel. So I think the American working class still remains very confused, especially through the framework of patriotism, nationalism. Nationalism very much confuses the working classes of every single society, where it makes the interests of the bourgeois your interests because, we're all American. Jeff Bezos and me, somehow we're the same creature. What do you make of this rising trade union movement we've sort of seen saying, can it become positive or will it remain reactionary?
It's a double-edged sword because by their design, trade unions are meant to resolve class antagonisms for the workers in their union. They make their lives more comfortable. Which is not necessarily a bad thing, but it does sort of stymie revolution, right? So by design, a union will never lead to revolution, but it does a lot in a rising class consciousness and shows workers the power of organization. So those things are important. It shows that collective action can change things for the better. But in the union, it's just meant to maintain the current system by making your life more comfortable. So it's really a double edged sword. And on the subject of nationalism too, there is good nationalism though. Black nationalism, Palestine nationalism, Irish, etc. When it's utilized to free yourself from oppression and not what's the word? Reinforce those systems that exist.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, what I should have said was imperialist nationalism is bad nationalism, like American nationalism, French nationalism, British nationalism. This is a very chauvinist nationalism that oppresses and reinforces capitalism, right? And of course, nationalism has its limits. I mean, even a lot of these nationalist movements that were liberatory themselves had a little bit of chauvinism in there. So nationalism should be recognized as a tool, right? It's a tool that has its limits, but it's still great for organizing the oppressed people of the world. Like you said, black people within America. Pan-African nationalism is great at standing up to capitalism. Palestinian nationalism, these MAGA dumbasses with their American nationalism is not incompatible with Marxism and communism, or they're insane. But that's no. Do you have something to add to that today?
Oh, I mean, I was just gonna agree. Yes, that's a ridiculous thing to think.
Absolutely. But it's interesting. I think right now the American working class struggle is purely economic, right? There's two stages of a struggle, a working class struggle. First of all is economic. That's getting your immediate economic goals met, right? I need better wages. I need a better contract with my boss. And then there's political. And when you take your working class struggle to the political realm, capitalism is broken, right? The system is broken, right? And you pair that with economic, that's when you actually have a dangerous working class movement. Right now, we seem to be stuck in the economic phase, right? Starbucks workers want better contracts. Longshoremen workers want better contracts and higher pay and more breaks, which isn't a bad thing. I'm not against it. But it really lacks that political struggle. And that political struggle would see, first of all, internationalism, right? Them standing with the Palestinian people. And it would see a more of a directed attack at the system. Do you have anything to add, Saint?
Yeah, what you were talking about with like the struggle that lies ahead. Of course, it's a class struggle, but there are the primary and primary and fundamental contradictions of the class antagonism that we experience in the USA. And the primary contradiction comes before the fundamental. That's would be settler colonialism and white supremacy. For a few reasons, it predates capitalism, and a working class cannot unite when half the working class hates the other half for not being white, etc. So then it's the economic that needs to be taken care of following such suits, the obvious class struggle of capitalism.
Yeah, yeah, really, really. I think right now we are standing at a moment where we're waiting for history to happen, right? There's something rising. The system cannot continue as it has. The 2024 election really sort of is the beginning of the death knells of neoliberalism as has been traditionally done. And even the Democrats are sort of walking back on neoliberalism as has traditionally been done. They're becoming more racist towards migrants. They're dropping trans people. So capitalism, as the bourgeois are guiding it, is entering into a very ugly phase. And we'll have to see if the working class can guide it into something productive. I will say, and this is important. And of course, Starbucks workers can't do much in terms of helping out the Palestinian people as much as the longshoremen workers could. Right, the longshoremen workers literally could have denied Israel weapons, as trade unions have all across the world. In India, trade unions have been refusing to ship weapons to Israel, which is amazing. Um, but the Starbucks workers unions have been standing up with the people of Palestine in solidarity with the BDS movement. So there is the inklings of internationalism. And I will say, all these Gaza protests that we've been seeing is showing that the American working class is sort of foregoing its national borders for a little bit, for a moment, and sort of recognizing that the working class of the world matters, that we are all one human family, even if they don't completely realize it yet. Do you have anything to add to that, Saint?
I think it's by and large it's a generational divide though too, like you said earlier, is that it's mostly young people don't see the differentiation in a Palestinian and an American. You know, by and large. I mean, obviously, there's still like reactionary groups in every generation, but as far as the general vibe is most people are against bombing kids for white supremacy reasons and Zionist reasons. So that's something that is, at least the tide is turning that way slowly in that way, and these events sort of are crystallizing it into something tangible so that we can utilize for the eventual overthrow of capitalism.
What do you think is the motivating reason behind that? I think personally it's because, first of all, Gen Z is the most diverse group ever. It's made up of immigrants. And second of all, we can talk to people all across the world. Meanwhile, sort of boomers' relations to foreign people is through media and legacy, sort of media and racist tropes that have been perpetuated within America. Like they really just see all Arabs as like Durka Durka terrorist people, something of that sort. Team Force Awesome kind of characters. Saint.
Yeah. No, I do. I think it's I think you hit the nail on the head there. It's just it's more diverse. There are people, many people come from mixed lineage or multiracial lineage, and it's just we're seeing that play out to where like that natural contradiction that formed from that is being resolved by diversity and information proliferation. But at the same time, there's still those reactionary elements that are doubling down, and that's bound to happen. But hopefully, with information and active working class participation, we can steer that in the better way before they go there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I will say right now, as American working class people start waging their economic struggle, it's so important to turn that economic struggle into a political struggle, right? Against the system of capitalism itself, to imbue within them that class consciousness. Um, this whole conversation about Brian Thompson, of course, has reframed what violence is versus systemic violence to the violence of the individual by a gun. Josh Shapiro, the governor of Pennsylvania, has said that we do not solve American disputes with violence when he signed bombs to be dropped on Israel. To be dropped on the Palestinian people going to Israel. And so very obviously, America does solve violence by guns and violence. I mean, does solve problems by violence and guns. It's just really whether it's state backed or not. What's your case, Saint, to let's say a boomer as to why Brian Thompson in fact did great violence against the American class people?
Well, just by hoarding health insurance, by the very act, the singular thing that their company's meant to do and deny people claims is, of course, a violent thing. When you let somebody die for a lack of a basic necessity that they need to require living, then there's an issue. That's more violent than a single or 3 or 4 shots there are ever going to be.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, Luigi killed one man. Brian Thompson killed over the course of his whole career 40,000 every single year. And you know what? United Healthcare obviously didn't do all of these, but he killed them through deprivation, slowly but surely, or over his entire career for his own shareholders and selfish profit motives. Denying people healthcare. And it's such a contradiction between the productive forces, right? We currently produce more than enough to give everybody accessible healthcare. We currently produce more than enough medical equipment. It's disgusting how much medical equipment we produce and goes to waste because it expires and things like that. A lot of medical equipment, a lot of medical stuff has an expiration date. So much gets thrown away unused. And the relations of production, right? This relation between bourgeois and proletariat, that they have to have their profit motive, so they artificially hoard healthcare from us, causing so many people to die. And of course, this is always framed as personal responsibility. But I think healthcare is the one place where most people are able to see through that bullshit of the American mythology of personal responsibility. Saint.
Yeah, it's something that we all have to have. We all need that. We all need healthcare, and a lot of people are sick of paying ridiculous amounts for their copays or their premiums, or if they don't have health insurance at all. I mean, there's 30 million Americans without access to healthcare, which is very alarming. And especially when you look at a global map and see that we are the one of the four countries on the planet, 4 countries on the planet that don't have free and universal healthcare. It's absurd that we have been tricked for so long into thinking, it'd be socialism. It would be to be hard, this horrible, evil thing to make sure kids got the penicillin that they need to survive. It's yeah, it's something that we can all relate to and see and have personal experience with. It's a good tool to utilize in this situation.
Absolutely. I think one of the most heartbreaking things about Brian, this whole case, is all of the stories of people who have been telling us stories about how their mother or father or son or loved one died because they needed life saving medicine at a critical point in their lives and they were denied it because of a health insurance company. And because they were not able to get access to it, or they had to wait a little bit longer to get access to it, right? After going through the healthcare process, getting denied, and you have to get through this whole rigmarole, that they died. Like it has been harrowing to see, and it really blows up in the face the idea that, oh, Brian Thompson was just a poor man with like a family and a wife and a kids. Oh, Osama bin Laden, Hitler had wives and kids.
Yeah.
That doesn't stop the systemic evil that these people did.
Right. No, I actually personally, I did actually die from pretty much a healthcare claim. When my diaphragm ruptured, my liver got caught up in there somehow, and anyways, I had to have emergency surgery. But the healthcare company waited 24 hours to see if they could find a way to cover it or deny it or what have you. So I had to sit there and wait in agonizing pain. And when I finally did get operated, once they cleared it, I did actually die for 4 minutes on the tail of my heart stopped. So it's not a great system.
No.
And especially laying there, like, in agonizing I couldn't breathe. I had a tube in my lungs, and knowing that they could fix me, like, right then, but they weren't because someone needed to pay for it, was, like, one of the first things that really made me aware of how glaring the inequality was in this system.
No, no, absolutely. And healthcare, I'm so sorry that happened to you, Saint. And I'm glad that you're okay. Um,
Oh, no, no, very
But healthcare is one of the places where even the capitalist mythology sort of falls apart, right? This free market mythology of, you shop around and you buy the best product and, there's competition and that makes everything better. Motherfucker, when I'm dying and having a heart attack, I'm not shopping around for the best hospital to go to, right? It's an emergency. I myself have had issues with this where because of how shitty healthcare is within America, our ERs are just flooded with people who waited as long as possible to seek help, to seek help to where they have had an absolute emergency, or even people with like a small issue go to the ER, right? Our ERs, our emergency healthcare systems are flooded because nobody is able to access preventative care over the long term. I had an issue. It's not as serious as yours, same, but I had a testicular torsion, which I would not recommend. It's a very painful thing, and I had to wait in an ER waiting line for like 2 3 hours, in the most immense pain possible before getting surgery, in front of people who had a cold, a flu, and I'm not angry at these people, right? They weren't able to get the healthcare that they needed, and so they just needed really quickly a prescription for some medicine. But this healthcare system is just so obviously broken that even the capitalist mythology can't fix it. This free market competition mythology doesn't even apply to it. Saying, go ahead.
Yeah, no, it's something that people can really see that it just doesn't work. Everyone has an experience of having been delayed or denied care, or the fact that we separate dental and health, which is insane. I mean, that should not. They're fundamentally linked together. I don't know why we do that, but it's something that, yeah, we all have experience with, and we can see that the free market doesn't work in healthcare. Yeah, like you said, you're not like shopping around as you're having a heart attack, and you couldn't even if you wanted to. So it's messed up. Yeah. That's probably one of the more darker sides of capitalism, to be honest, next to genocide and war. But yeah,
It's yeah, absolutely. It's a very slow, painful death that capitalism gives you, which also poverty in general. I mean, there's a lot of slow, painful deaths in capitalism. Um, what I will say is that this sort of all reminds me of Martin Shkreli, the CEO who bought, or no, the investor who bought this life-saving medicine, I believe for AIDS, and raised the price up about 5,000%. That showed how broken privatized healthcare is. Why do you think America is the only major capitalist Western nation not to have healthcare, Saint?
Oh, there's a lot of reasons. But I think money needs because of lobbying, because we have legal bribery in the United States. The government is directly owned and has always been owned by the ruling elite, acts in their interest. And so obviously the people that own big pharma are going to be like, hey, pass these bills where you can't negotiate the prices for your medicine. You can't negotiate the et cetera, et cetera. So we have to pay the most because we have literally zero representation in our government, whereas other nations have at least a Labor Party or a Communist Party in their parliaments, and they actually act in the interest of people. Whereas here we have Congress and senators, even if they pretend to care about us, by the time they get into office, they're bought and paid for because it's a pay to play system.
No.
I'd say that'd be the main reason I'd say.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the funniest thing about America is that our system of liberalism is so immensely broken that, and of course, this is true for all capitalist nations, of course. I mean, what you just said, but it's so glaringly obvious and disgustingly broken within America in a unique way that not even the European democracies, liberal democracies, which aren't real democracies, can do. Right. And I think part of it is because Europe has had a stronger communist movement, for example, and that has really pressured their governments to give concessions. The European powers had stronger and more militant communist movements. But it's that the American system of liberalism is so broken that when we overthrow foreign governments, we don't even implement in an American style democracy. We implement in a parliamentary system, right? Even we know that this shit is so broken, so untenable, so unable to be controlled, so corrupt that we have to do parliamentarism or a direct democracy, right? Those are the only two governments that America ever imposes after it overthrows a government. It's either a direct a parliamentary system or a direct dictatorship. Go ahead, Saint. Uh, Yellow. Did I cut out?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. There you
Oh,
go.
okay. All I said was just that the American system is so broken that even when we overthrow a foreign government, we don't even implement it in an American style system of democracy.
That's true. Yeah. No, it's not broken though. To be fair, it is designed badly. It's everything's flawed. And so it's just playing out as it should. Like international liberalism had the best intentions and it just does not work. Well, the best intentions for the ruling class, not for the workers, but still. Oh, and I'm sorry. If I could chime back to your point about how the European governments had better communist movements or whatnot, that's why they have like a more cushioned like working class. I really think that has a lot to do with the proximity to the Soviet Union. Like Red
Mm.
Scare wouldn't be as effective when you can just see people from the USSR all the time. So instead, Finland, Estonia, all these Baltic areas, and the Scandinavian countries that have a what they call like Nordic style or whatnot is most likely just because of their proximity to the USSR.
No, absolutely. I mean, also, Finland almost had a red revolution. I mean, I think social democracies were, and also especially after World War II, the European countries were so close to falling into communism is always a popular revolution, but they were so close to having communist revolutions. Greece was on the precipice of a communist revolution. Italy was on the precipice of a communist revolution. France. I mean, at the very least, all three of these countries had very strong communist movements after World War II that had resisted the Nazis and were popular amongst the masses. So became very close, especially in the post-war era, to sort of overthrowing the ruling bourgeois. And the bourgeois had to save face. That's really why France's government right now is the way that it is. It was purposely set up by de Gaulle to limit the amount of participation that communists could have within the government. So the prime minister within France has enormous, insane amounts of power that most Western democracies don't have. But yeah, yeah, they did give concessions. However, those concessions have all almost gone away, right? Like after the collapse of the Soviet Union, those concessions have fallen away to austerity. And yes, the European powers still have nationalized healthcare, but it's a very shitty, carved out nationalized healthcare that's getting worse and worse every single year. Saint.
Well, it's because also there's not like a unified bourgeoisie class in any sort of way. like they are as ruling people of each nation. And like the ruling people in Finland or Sweden, etc., like are more willing to make concessions to the working class to make their lives more comfortable to forego a national revolution there. Whereas here, the oligarchs don't give any fucks about us, so we're constantly getting bent over the barrel. So it's not there's not cohesion. It's just they seem to act similar because they have similar interests. Their class interests naturally align, but beyond that, I don't believe there's any sort of great collusion in there. And sometimes they even do some infighting as far as that goes, within as in regards to like supporting fascism or et cetera, et cetera. So it's something that what was I saying? It looks coherent. It's not as much. It's kind of just about like the material conditions in their own areas, and that's partly why Scandinavian countries are doing so much better.
Um, yes, no, but even the Scandinavian countries have been sort of slowly shifting towards austerity. Not in not in an overt way as much as say, let's say the UK, but slowly but surely they are getting there towards getting rid of every single right that was granted to them. I think it's partly because capitalism has sort of hit its ceiling, the falling rate of profit has led to neoliberalism. You can't really, neoliberalism started getting introduced even before the collapse of the USSR, even though there was sort of a global shift in a sort of a rot within the USSR and the Eastern Bloc. Neoliberalism was introduced a little bit before that in the 70s and 80s through Margaret Thatcher and Reagan. And that really was because there was sort of this global crisis within capitalism. The falling rate of profit, which is endemic to capitalism over time as automation and your ability to produce things faster and faster leads to them being cheaper and cheaper. And that gets adopted across industries. Your ability to make profit through these industries gets smaller and smaller because there's less labor power within each product and commodity. Ahem. That led to this crisis where capitalism, that Keynesian capitalism, that was giving concessions to the working class could not work anymore, right? You cannot have that welfare sort of protected capitalism. And so a little bit of the bad effects of capitalism had to come home, right? It was a boomerang effect. I'm worried about the boomerang effects of Palestine. And obviously my hearts are with the Palestinian people, but what they're testing in Palestine so easily could be used in a future BLM movement, right? Black Lives Matter movement or another mass protest against the killing of a person, right? Or any other generalized working class movement. These surveillance techniques, these AIs that they're using to kill Palestinians selectively, because AI is called like Daddy Comes Home. Palestine really seems to be a testing ground for what they have in store for the future of us.
That yeah, it's true. But it's a testing ground because it's just a battlefield. Because the tactics they're employing as far as like, you know, elimination of people is something that's tried and true for capitalism. Something's done since its beginning. You had to take the land from the people that, you had to claim you owned it after that. So it's yeah, like what they do in Ukraine too. They're using it against drone storms and all these other new technologies that they're finding out to just figure out ways to end people and keep themselves in power. And it's very, very disturbing. It's the things that they can do now, and especially with the advent of technology. And it's just getting worse all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. The Luigi Mangione trial will not be for a couple of years. These trials take forever. It might be in 2026, 2027. I'm not a lawyer, but I know that these take forever and there's not going to be an immediate trial anytime soon. Saint, how do you hope that this trial plays out? And what do you see it playing out as?
It depends on public opinion, I think. I think it depends largely on public opinion. And the jury selection is going to be a difficult thing for any sort of prosecutor to be able to say that's a reasonable jury. I'm sure they're going to contest the results regardless. Because public opinion is so saturated, I don't think there's many people who haven't heard of this case. I dare to say there might not be any people who haven't heard of this case yet. So it's gonna be a circus if nothing else. I do think it'll be sooner than a few years though. I think at the at the least 6 months maybe. They'll push it through quicker. Same thing they did with Rittenhouse. Remember how quick that was?
Mm.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not a lawyer. I don't know how the legal process works. But the way I do see it playing out is an absolute kangaroo court that's stacked against Luigi. I mean, for example, the poor guy, they did a perp walk with him. They're trying to make him seem as bad as a guy as possible, like he's a Batman villain, like he's the fucking Joker, or Lex Luthor. I mean, it's insane. They're trying to pin so much against him that I do not see this court trial working out any other way than an absolute kangaroo court. I think that whatever jurors they are going to pick are going to be the most reactionary, boomer, and I'm not even saying like age-wise boomer. I'm saying like mentally boomer jurors that they can. There is no such thing as neutrality within the American legal system. It's all just a fucking farce. And they're gonna pick the people who are within the jury the most inundated in the system of the hegemony or capitalism, or are gullible, right? Who are people who even side with Luigi, but still think that he should be jailed. Like have some sympathies towards Luigi, but still think he's gonna be jailed. My prediction very much is that Luigi does not walk free, and unfortunately, he does get sort of turned into an example because it seems like they're trying to make an example out of him. This terrorism charge, which came out of nowhere, is very much, and that word terrorism is just at this point pretty much just anybody that the American empire and the capitalists don't like, right? Like maybe you could argue that terrorists used to mean something in like the 90s when like animal rights group activists were like sending bombs to CEOs' houses. But at this point, terrorism, it just means I don't like them. They stand against American capitalism, right? And pretty much that's what it's always meant. But
I
it
call them.
alluded go ahead,
Sorry,
sorry.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. I call them freedom fighters. Terrorists. It's just freedom fighters. That's what they are. I mean, it's a badge of honor at this point. And if you can get labeled a villain by the ruling elite of the United States, you're probably a decent human being. That's all it is.
Absolutely. I mean, we can make exceptions for the Osama bin Ladens, right?
Well, I mean, yeah, I don't know everything about that. Like, so yes, I know that there are obviously reactionary elements that went against American imperialism that were not good for people. But by and large, I feel like that we were still in Afghanistan bombing them when we shouldn't have been. We were still doing American stuff everywhere. So yes, maybe they responded in a way that was not beneficial to people, but I can't fault them for responding. Like, you gotta be pushed pretty far as a human being to want to strap a bomb to yourself and blow yourself up, right? Like, what makes them get there? America did. So, while those might not be heroes, so to speak, they still understandable reactions to trying situations.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think Michael Parenti put it best when he said that terrorism within the Middle East is the wrong reaction to the is the wrong solution to a very real phenomenon of American imperialism, right? And he said that the right reaction, of course, was anti-imperialism,
I
social
lost their game, but
yeah. Oh, lost you. Okay. I think Michael Parenti put it best when he said that terrorism within the Middle East, these terrorist groups were the wrong reaction to a very right analysis of how much American capitalism has fucked over the region. Um,
oh, truth.
yeah.
Yes.
But obviously, Salafi, Wahhabi terrorist groups are very reactionary. But yes, terrorism, when it's used against groups like Hamas, which are just simply fighting for the liberation of the Palestinian people against oncoming Israeli Jewish settlement and settler colonialism, which seeks to kill and replace these people, or even against Hezbollah, which has fought groups like ISIS within Syria and other terrorist groups, and has been a moderate group that even allies with Christian minorities and built hospitals. The word has become meaningless, and it's especially become meaningless when it's used against Luigi assassinating the real terrorist, who is Brian Thompson. I think that right now there are two definitions of terrorism. There's the terrorism that the ruling class uses, and that's anybody who stands against us, and there's the real terrorism definition, which is the ruling class themselves. Saying
Absolutely. Yeah. But I will say that to go back to the actual, like, the people that we've traditionally called terrorists, like, even if their goals aren't aligned, it's hard to, like, dislike people for trying to fight for their own freedom, even if that freedom that they're trying to obtain is insanely misguided. It's it's still America's fault. It's still imperialist fault. And as far as, yes, the real terrorist, what's terrifying to me is possibly dying because I don't have health care. That's terrifying. That's real terror. Not people who are just trying to get Americans out of their country and to stop bombing their children.
absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I will say, I wouldn't, I would add a little bit of nuance to that because a lot of Wahhabi terrorist groups have like sex slavery and they stone women to death and they stone minorities to death. So,
No, I agree.
yeah,
Like I said, like, it's not that I'm not condoning their actions. I'm just not condemning their fight for their own liberation. And
no,
yes, like,
absolutely.
I would never. never be down with anyone who have sex slaves or who would stone people to death.
Absolutely, absolutely. I just have to add that nuance. I know you're a nuance saying. I just have to add that nuance in case somebody's listening and they're like, "Oh my God, maybe Osama bin Laden is not that bad of a guy." Maybe Osama bin Laden was a great anti-imperialist fighter. But yeah, no, this word terrorism has pretty much been diluted into anybody who stands up against American capitalism, as it is said right now. And really, you're right. It is a badge of honor for Luigi, for Hamas, for Hezbollah, for all those brave fighters, the Houthis, who stand up against both American-backed terrorism, which is America and Israel have a long history of supporting ISIS and Al Qaeda themselves. And these groups always conveniently attack whenever America needs it, and have never attacked Israel, very funnily enough. And America is currently supporting these terrorists in Syria through the HTS government. So there's this working class definition of terrorism, which is the ruling class, and there's their definition of terrorism, which is violence that is inconvenient to us. And the only good violence is the violence that we use, is our state sanctioned violence. Finally, I'd like to bring this conversation to the police. I think this has sort of revealed how disgusting American police are. The NYPD has a police force funding bigger than some countries. I mean, it's insane. The amount of money that we spend on the NYPD, and the NYPD is a global police force, right? The state police of New York has offices in Indonesia. And it's like a couple officers, but it's insane. And yet they were so fucking ineffective at catching Luigi. A McDonald's manager did it. So Saint, I'll give you the stage as the resident cop hater.
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, everyone should have the same hatred I have for cops. It should be natural. But beyond that, yeah, they're of course they're ineffectual. The everything that they do conforms to their bias. They don't the crime that they say they solved, the crime that they um, go out and police for is crime that they made up. The rates go up with more cops. They're ineffectual because they don't do anything good. So, which was why it was surprising to me that they found Luigi within a few days, even through a tip line, or that they even identified him as a person of interest. Prior to that was alarming to me. Nothing about that seems kosher, as far as that goes. It's the people can't solve a jaywalking. How the hell did they solve a what seemed like a very very well planned assassination.
Yeah. I mean, Saint, we've just been in the aftermath of it. It has been revealed that even though the NYPD and Eric Adams said that they knew who the suspect was, they were sort of bullshitting. So they didn't even know. Basically, like we spent millions of dollars and they couldn't figure it out. It was really just a random person in Pennsylvania that quote unquote figured out this case.
Yeah, it is something that is not surprising, but it should be to some people that yeah, they're totally ineffectual. They're there to be bullies, to keep us down, and to cage and shoot us, which is what they're good at. Solving crimes not really their forte.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think the American police are part of the state. The state is a dictatorship of the bourgeois. They're used to protect the capitalist class and their interests. And they're so fucking ineffective that after getting millions and millions of dollars, they can't even fucking do that. They can't even protect the class that they were supposed to because Brian Thompson got shot and they did not find Luigi Mangione. Let's face it, it was that anonymous person in McDonald's and the anonymous McDonald's worker in Pennsylvania. Um, I mean, it's disgusting. Go ahead, Sane.
Yeah, it's it's alarming if you believe that they're there for our benefit, or even I mean, they can't be good at something when so few acts of violence are perpetrated ever against the ruling elite, or if they are, they're usually by other ruling elite, and then nothing is done about it anyways. So they're good at catching and caging working class people, especially young black men, and putting them into like a revolving door prison system. That's their job. That's all it is. It's just a modern day slave catching ring racket.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Look, to round off this conversation, we were talking about how American capitalism is so disgusting in terms of its healthcare system, but also American capitalism is so disgusting in terms of our police force. Our police force gets millions of dollars. It's almost like a trained army. They have guns. In most countries, even capitalist countries where the police, yes, are there to protect capitalism, they usually don't have guns. Most police usually just have a baton. They're usually not armed, and they try to resolve their conflicts peacefully. Why do you think the American police is so uniquely armed, so uniquely violent, even compared to other capitalist countries?
It's the way our mode of production is structured, and it's the way the ruling elite here does things because they keep the contradictions so alarming with segregation, with Jim Crow era, with even up to this day with the prison system and etc. And as much as they rake us over the coals, so to speak, that we are much more prone to respond to that. And then that tied in with the freedom and individual liberty nonsense that they feed into us. We sort of have this more fervent we need to be controlled more, essentially, because the contradictions here are much more alarming. Class antagonisms are much more present. And with more profit incentive comes more like this. When like even imperial powers like the UK or they don't have guns. Well, they have guns for their SWAT teams, etc. Or in Japan where like officers have to like basically get permission to draw their weapon. Here we get three of us put down a day by a gun by a cop.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I think it's just because America is one of the few countries where they give you the least amount of concessions within the industrial capitalist developed core. Obviously, within the colonized world, the global south, there's no concessions to be had whatsoever. But also, I think it speaks to our racialized past. I mean, America, within the South, in the American South, the white population was outnumbered tenfold by the black slave enslaved population. And so America has uniquely had to need a very violent police force in order to just cover this sort of white control over the population. This really is an inheritance of both our slave and settler colonial past where this white minority has need to use as much suppression as possible to maintain its control. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, that's essentially what it comes down to, and it's never gone away. It's just changed the way it looks. It's just different forms of oppression. They call it the prison system now, and they just they're very good at what they do as far as shooting us goes. So it works for that, I guess. But other than that, it's the lies that we were told that works for us is not. It's not ever been that way, and that's why I don't think they're able to keep with that ruse any longer, and it's becoming much more apparent.
It is. It is. I mean, the mythology of cops is like, what are you gonna do if your house gets robbed or something horrible happens? But cops barely serve us. All we do is we call them and they come to our house and they either shoot us. I mean, so many cases have come out in which people called the police and they shot us. I mean, Sonia Masi, that poor woman, she just had a boiling pot of water and she called the police because she had some issue in her house and she was shot. Um, Either that or they come to her house after it's robbed and they write down something, some paperwork, they file it, and then the case never gets solved. I mean, it's such an ineffectual tool for us, but it's such an effectual tool for the bourgeois because the police are always there whenever there needs to be a labor strike broken. Within the Gaza protest recently, we've seen multiple videos of police descending on protesters, batoning them, and the police are there whenever somebody is behind on rent and they need to be evicted by their landlord, but they're never there for us. They're such ineffective bastards when it comes to us. Saint, I'll let you have the final word.
Yeah, as far as cops go, that's pretty much exactly right. They don't do anything good for us. They never help us when we need them, and they're never around when we need them. But they're surely fast to break up a strike or, you know, kick a homeless person off a bench, and that's something that we all have to realize and come to terms with because they're not going to help us. And if anything, we're going to see them be used against us more and more frequently, like they have with the Amazon strikers or Palestinian protesters.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The police breaking up the Amazon strike and making that man do a perp walk on the same day as Luigi Mangione, I think really was a striking image for all of us. I say thank you so much for coming on. I got to have you on more, man. You were on the foundation of this podcast. And yeah, if you have any final words, let us know. And where can
Yeah,
people best find you?
no, it's always a pleasure. I'm glad to be a part of it, and I'm always willing to come on discuss any sort of ways that our system is failing us and what we can do about that. It's always a good conversation with you, Preet. I appreciate you having me on.
Yep, yeah, and maybe I can hop onto a live, your next live sometime soon.
Yeah, that'd be great. Absolutely. I'd love you on.
All right, so you have a good one.
You as well, Preet. Take care.
This episode of the Pokepreet Pod has been brought to you by our generous members on our Patreon. If you'd like to become one of them, go to patreon.com/thepokepreetpod. Thank you.
What the fuck? Glory to Stalin, I barely made it.
And a special shout out to our Marshal of the Soviet Union member, Matthias T. If you'd also like a shout out, please consider subscribing to our Patreon, where you can also get episodes up to a month early. Thank you.